made to meet client needs and enhance employment retention potential. Also, if the caregivers keep doing things that are counterproductive, it will undo the beneficial aspects of support. Caregivers need to be trained to be extraordinarily supportive. Also, the professionals should not be doing things that will be counterproductive. We should avoid discouraging ambitious clients as they have every right to their ambition, and we should aim at reinstituting capacity through support in case capacity has been eroded due to exceedingly bitter life experiences. And Western studies indicate that if programs are converted to the individual placement and support mode, there are no increases in negative outcomes such as hospitalization, incarceration, homelessness, suicide attempts, and program dropouts. In fact, interviews with families and mental health staff and clients themselves reveal widespread satisfaction with the conversion to individual placement and support approach, IPS approach. Also, screening for job readiness or pre-vocational preparation induces doubts about self-capability, about handling a job, as premature anxiety tends to set in, and this lack of confidence will hinder development of job handling capacity. On-job training is a much better alternative, as per our experiences. And we really should be looking at what sort of pre-therapeutic environment should be created by society to make people eligible for employment in the aftermath of a severe mental illness. FST envisions this, and implementing what's mentioned at the table is the first step. And at a much later stage, cognitive retraining and supported employment can actually enhance FST benefits. And how? That mine is a case in point, and helping others will be immensely therapeutic and satisfying and healing, even as clients with some preliminary support are facilitated in terms of developing agency for self-recovery and using this insight to step up recovery of similarly unfortunate others. So this is where advocacy would also play an important role. If we want clients to retain their jobs, give those jobs in preferred areas and provide ongoing support. There are no studies that provide information about the nature and extent of support required at each stage of the rehab process in women, and uncertainty regarding staff availability can affect job tenure. So FST is a model reflecting praxis and is capabilities informed, thus facilitating employment through elimination of caregiver and psychiatric negativity. And it's essential to reconceptualize societal logistics to enable this. Barriers such as readiness requirements, prolonged assessments, lack of access to programs, rigid interfaces between mental health and professional programs can all affect competence on jobs for the severely mentally ill in job interviews. And we need to also bear in mind that this could raise issues pertaining to disclosure and contact between employers and other employment staff and job accommodations. This is where we have to ask ourselves the question, are we actually following the UNCRPD paradigm on reasonable accommodation in terms of job accommodation? So this is something that employers need to ask themselves, mental health professionals need to ask themselves before they attempt to counsel people. So supported education in my case created access and potential to perform the more skilled jobs, and advanced degrees in technical skills can be facilitated via FST. So skill training, if at all provided, would help play an important role after the client is employed. And FST could be one example of a micro model that others yesterday expressed a need for. And finally, it is very wrong to think that the severely mentally ill do not want to work. They many a time do want to work, but don't know how to make themselves functional. So very often it is the case that families are not trained regarding the logistics of support rendering via exhaustive counseling. Therefore, please pay close attention to articulation of employment needs, and this will facilitate their engagement with work, the client's engagement with work, that will be meaningful and fulfilling to the severely psychosocially challenged. Now, the thing is, what are the insights on how employment can be facilitated? What is happening to the client deep within more often than not? The older client is what I'm talking of in our country. A summary of some of the points reflecting this would be, if FST is implemented on women and caregivers before other training programs are, then we would well envision going beyond semi-skilled jobs like being courier women or data engineers or medical transcription people or paper packaging people. So one could also go beyond vocation training, which can only, which has only traditionally thought of candle and card making. So living in a supportive community, what does this mean? Supportive communities that do what FST envisions in some way or other. This is the kind of support that is needed if a severely mentally ill person has to recover and be highly functional. And 45 minutes or 10 or 20 minutes of counseling once a week will not help. Monumental support of the kind that FST envisions will help. We could look at creative placements for women and courses like the interior decoration and design courses, fashion designing, many of these things. Mentally ill women are very creative and intelligent, they enjoy doing these courses. But of course, if they have other alternatives and options, that should be considered. So opportunities to generate employment on their own would also help. An exhaustive regimen that FST envisions should be provided at home for, in my case and in the case of other people whom I rehabilitated, with the help of their caregivers who swallowed their egos and did what was productive, was a minimum of 5 years. Okay? So they were made functional, we were made functional education-wise and employment-wise. It's a very slow process. And vocation training could also be the first strong training, though not necessarily always. And reality confrontation would not be of much use. I'll come to that later. Even if you want to tell a mentally inclined that sometimes what she's talking or expecting is not in conformation with reality, is not in consonance with reality, then this should be done without the use of client blaming attributions and pathologizing labels. That's very important. Yeah. And we need to have linkages with NGOs who that teach mentally women to run business ventures. And as far as cognitive dysfunction is concerned, social dysfunction is concerned, low rates of employment are concerned, these need not necessarily be initial components of schizophrenia. There's a social reality that precedes these things, which should be tackled before confidence drops and these things happen. And many often these neurocognitive programs that focus on attention, memory, executive functioning, and implementing, as far as these are concerned, the reality behind neurocognitive deficits are negative experiences associated with certain skills, often reinforced. These negative experiences are reinforced with caregiver because of caregiver and professional negativity. That is the inside story more often than not. So, caregivers and professionals may often not know how and what to do, and that's the reason for non-recovery, and this is often the hidden story. So this decline from functionality to dysfunctionality may never happen if FST is first given. And environmental barriers may in themselves create neurocognitive deficits, as I've already said. Mere impairments don't necessarily render people dysfunctional. There's a time phase between an impairment and the impairment actually becoming a disability. That is the crucial time at which positive feedback ought to be given. Negative experiences associated with environmental barriers create neurocognitive deficits. And non-functionality is a consequence of being distrusted and dictated to just because of a diagnosis. So don't underestimate your clients. The moment a person gets a diagnosis of mental illness, very often the family stands over his or her shoulder and says, this is what you should be doing, this is what you should be doing. Every action is being dictated to. So that should not happen. Encourage the clients to be adventurous. And there's a time lag between high functionality and low functionality, and professions often advocate low expectations. This should not be done. Just because they want to save their skin. And work performance evaluation may in no way be reflective of true employment potential. It just tells you what the person is at that point in time, not indicate in any way the complete potential that can be realized in his or her case. So work-oriented therapy, pre-vocational training, counseling, post-assessment, they will not be making assessment of innate or true potential actually. And support groups should never be negative in the guise of being realistic. That's what I'm trying to say. And work simulation activities will not help a work if you underestimate an intelligent client whose performance is temporarily deterred due to lack of confidence owing to a negative environment. And to develop confidence and to relearn things will take a long time. So we need to give information to employers about FST and train them. This may be a much better recommendation than before you facilitate something else. Then there is this massive drop down of confidence, and when professionals say it will be a great thing in itself if you recover. Such negative feedback should never be given in the initial stages, and more so later. So dearth of research creates a gap between intentions and actual implementation. So models like FST seek to fill this gap by telling you the inner story and catch them young. This model is better conceptualized via qualitative research methodology, and you need to read between lines of lived experiences of the mentally ill people. And FST is a capabilities-informed approach. Very valid point made by Akhileshwar yesterday was that no mental illness is a permanent mental illness. So these are the real hidden issues with the employment gradient. Otherwise, according to doctors, I should have never been here today. So employment based on recovery model principles should go hand in hand with medication. And the UNCRPD says, remove all the attitudinal barriers before you label people. And I would advocate that the users and consumers break the stigma and silence after establishing themselves and not before, because that invariably creates problems. You do break the silence, but do it after you establish yourself. And give required support. The professional should give required support instead of attributing things to innate propensity, and caregivers should also be giving the same sort of support. So employment doesn't happen just with meds and rehab alone. Recovery model is needed, which means that if a person is being put in a particular place to facilitate recovery, there should also be a ramping mechanism by means of which the person can make inroads back into community life. So, and finally, I'd like to state this. I can't help thinking how many other potential Dr. Lavanyas have been locked in rooms, deprived of a dignified living, being sexually abused, received no recognition in life on account of being labeled medical failures, and caregivers doing the wrong things, and professionals really not knowing what sort of support is required, and more often than not, see, these people, the caregivers, the professionals, they are trying their best to do things for the client, but they at times tend to do things that will not facilitate growth. They're afraid to let the client grow and experiment things for herself and all that. So that is where we need a change. And I would end this presentation by thanking, as I always do, my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for having brought me to where I am. There's a spiritual component to my recovery, and I will not touch upon that now, but anyway, I render my thanks to him. So thank you.
A volatile presentation. I have got one comment and one question. Since yesterday I see that there is a kind of a negativity towards candle making and greeting cards. I think that's a kind of hierarchy and attitude problem that we have in our mind. Because if that fulfills a person's artistic aspiration, we should not negate it. And it's pretty much the hierarchy between our child going to humanities stream or science stream. That's one comment. Second is, what is the cost of FST? And why do you think that FST has to be implemented before any vocational training? Why can it not go hand in hand? And the third comment, that while many Lavanyas are locked in, we see a bright Lavanya here. So obviously there is a need for professionals. Obviously the mental health professionals are really good that you are sitting here and making this presentation. And many of us have gone through sexual abuse. Many of us have gone through ups and downs. Many of us have suffered depression. So it is all there, but we are all here because we have had some very, very fantastic doctors to take care of us. I think we should also acknowledge that. Thank you.
Yeah. One thing you said was the cost of FST. The thing is, you see, it is very individual based. And why I did not bear the cost of supporting this program, the caregivers were the ones who bore the cost. And in my case, it was around something like 3 to 4 lakhs a year. And you see, that was because I was part of a PhD course, I needed to buy books, I needed to do things, and there was only so much that my scholarship would permit. So that was what it was. My PhD did entail a huge cost. And then you also said that why not vocational training going hand in hand with other kinds of intervention. See, I'm not against vocational training at all. There's nothing wrong with candle making and card making. I'm not saying that at all. In fact, these could be things which initially help a person explore avenues to creativity. But then, if that is the ultimate thing, when the person is capable of doing something larger than that, then we must also consider that and not just limit the person's potential by saying you're only fit for making cards and candles. And then, professionals must be really good, and so that's why I'm here. Well, there's a negative side to my experience with professions, there's a very positive side also. One thing is many of the professions in India don't even know what sort of medication to give for what problem. I mean, that's a common thing. But then I went to a very good professional, and for reasons of confidentiality, I'm not reveal her name. And then she did give very good medication, but she indulged in exercises of psychiatric negativity. And that is why I stopped going to her after she prescribed the medicines. I took the medicines, but I never went to her for counseling. Because she invariably said, don't try this, don't try that, you might fail, you might fail. And I didn't like that. So that is where the need to change. And you talked about sexual abuse, all of us, many of us might have gone through it, yes. But then we also have to look at ways to prevent it. And that is why I'm saying that we have to institute a model that will create an environment that will facilitate the optimal utilization of other therapies and other support systems. Thank you.
Goes into ensuring that the awareness is here. And that is not only that a lot goes on your own behalf, but there may be forces behind you due to which you are here. What is that thing which is unique, which makes you sit here?
There are many Lavanyas out there, but there's one Lavanya sitting here, one of the people who've been rehabilitated. And what makes me sit here is precisely what I've been discussing throughout this entire presentation. The entire FST table with its support component. And I do respect my caregiver a lot because today she and I have become best friends, my mom and I. And we help in other families being able to reinstitute an environment of recovery. And so today we are thick pals, my mother and I had to work quite a bit on that, on our relationship also. And I do respect her status as a caregiver, and I do respect the role that professions have played in my recovery. But there were times when I really wanted support, when I wanted to cling on to something, and none of these people provided anything. So that was when I had to, kind of draw on my spiritual resources, depend on myself, talk to myself, make myself do things, and that involved a lot.
So in your case, it is your mother.
It is my mother who supported after I conceptualized the model.
Basically, it is you, then your mother, and professionals in that order.
Yeah, but professionals, they also indulged in a lot of negativity. I had to ignore the negative messages, and that was something I didn't like. And because of that, lots of families are being misled, due to which reason I say that if you're going to do counseling, do a holistic form of counseling. Don't say, this cannot happen, that cannot happen. A capabilities-informed approach, a recovery-oriented approach, which says, yes, you're capable of doing things. Why don't you try is the need of the hour?
Any other question?
The environmental barriers that makes the neurocognitive deficit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to know what are the barriers in environment which cause the neurocognitive deficit.
Yeah.
No, his question is what are the barriers in the environment, you are right?
Yeah, which leads to neurocognitive deficit.
A negative attitude. And see, one thing is, as soon as the diagnosis is made, the client might often attempt to do things. If the person is not able to do something because of extra inputs not being provided or adequate training not being provided, the caregiver, the professional might tend to think that this has happened because of a mental illness, when this may not be a consequence of mental illness at all. So then a very negative attitude will be displayed by them, and that will be absorbed by the patient in the psyche, and that will make her think that she's actually incapable of doing things, when she might have and would have indeed done things with some support behind her.
But what has it got to do with mental illness per se? That can happen with anyone with or without mental illness.
Yeah, I'm saying that can happen to somebody with or without mental illness, but the people with mental illness very often are hypersensitive, they're very sensitive. And if the sensitivity can be channelized, it's good. But then there's also another side to it. If somebody comes up with somebody whom you care for, whom you trust, comes up with negative inputs regarding your capabilities and things like that, then you tend to trust the person, and then and then you lose confidence in yourself. That's the whole process. For instance, when I went to a computer class, it was a money-making computer academy that never gave me proper inputs in how certain programs needed to be implemented in computer science. So then I tried to refer books, and I needed a lot of preliminary inputs that anybody going to a regular college, a good college, would get. But I didn't get that. And then when I told my mother, she said I was just too lazy to read. And then that created so much of an anxiety in me that I was afraid of sitting in front of a computer for 5 years. So during my BA and MA, I never sat in front of a computer. It was only when doing my MPhil that I mustered the energy and the courage to do it. That was also done in gradual steps. I had to chart out a program for myself, and that had a number of steps. I had to go through those steps. My caregiver had to support me. So all this negativity and this trauma might have been avoided if I had been given the inputs that I wanted to be given, and the inputs that I should have been given. So you see, there's an experiential reality to these things.
Okay, but the things which you have told, if this happened in your life and there is no cognitive deficits, if that happened, you would not come to this level.
No, I think when these things happen, there's a drastic drop down in confidence levels and self-esteem levels, and that can really bring about some of the things which come across as neurocognitive deficits. It was when I was supported in my recovery that I overcame all those things, and now I'm just as good as anybody else. So that's why I say this, and this was the case with other caregivers also who were dealing with their clients.
The things which you are saying is confident part, self-esteem, so apart from neurocognitive, cognitive...
Not necessarily, there's an experiential reality to that. Just before the induction of a neurocognitive deficit, there will be a very, very, very substantial reality, a negative reality to the whole thing, and that is why it would have been induced in the first place. We need to look into those stories and those experiential aspects.
What is the neurocognitive deficit?
Cognitive is the cognitive functions, attention, concentration, and these things. And the self-confidence and the self-esteem would play more.
But what is this is right. Our emotional states our emotional states have a relationship